We've talked about a lot of different things, different coverages, schemes, blitzes, looks. If you had to say in college football in 2026, the one trend that I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is coming, what do you think it would be?
I think we're going to see a lot more investment in being multiple. And I think we see this with Oklahoma. The two best examples of this are probably Oklahoma and are probably Indiana. I think a lot of people are going to go in and they're going to study Indiana and they're going to say, look what they did without all these premium players. Are there good players at Indiana? Yes.
What is happening? Welcome back or welcome to Y Option. It's the off season. I'm your host, Yogi Roth. And today's conversation is diving into some scheme, some X's and O, and an amazing story you need to hear if you love ball. As always, every conversation is presented by our founding sponsor, 76, keeping you on the go, go, go so you never miss a beat. And I feel like this man doesn't miss a beat, especially on the defensive side. Cody Alexander, the founder of Match Quarters. Check him out on Substack. We love supporting Substack here at Y Option because we're on Substack as well. Cody, I've been reading your stuff for a while now, a couple years, and was like, we got to get this guy on. We got to talk ball. Thank you for spending time with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Of course, of course. So let's just start there, just because I'm a linear storyteller and I want to get into trends, and we'll talk about trends in football, Big Ten defensive trends. But when did the light bulb go on for you? I'm going to create a Substack and I'm going to give people unmatched expertise on the defensive side of the football and showcase the X's and O's on my platform.
Yeah, so I took a job where I thought it was going to be this is it. I've finally arrived. I worked at Baylor for 3 years, so I was there as a defensive graduate assistant for RG3's Heisman Trophy win, and then the very first Big 12 championship for Baylor. So I came in at the absolute right time to be a GA. The NCAA offered the 4 GAs, so they went from 2 to 4 while I was there. So I was able to capture one of those. The problem was I had a kid and I needed to go back. I needed to make some real money, and trying to go from a GA to full-time job, especially in a year where no one left, because Philip Montgomery didn't take the Tulsa job until like a year later. So it was kind of like I was in this weird purgatory. Luckily, I live in Texas. I'm certified in the state of Texas, so I could easily transition. You can actually make a really good living as a teacher and a coach here in the state. So I did that. Kind of second year out, I took this job that I thought was really going to be kind of this is it. I found the job. I want my kids to go to school here. We're going to be here for a while. And then the AD fired the head coach because in this business, you get hired to get fired. And so I'm sitting here. And really remember, I was a GA, didn't make any money. So we're poor. We can't really move. So I'm like, okay, I got to stay here. But I knew my role was going to be a lot lower. And so I just was like, what can I do? And I've always liked writing, but I was you as a coach, and like I think it's like for me as a football guy, I was like, well, I'm not going to write the next Harry Potter, and I'm not a journalist. I was like, so I don't know like what to do. So I was like, I'll just start a blog and I'll just start putting and laying down what I believe in, and put it in the worst place that you possibly can put, which is the internet. And so I just was like, we'll start doing that. And so in 2016, I started at Match Quarters. It took me 4 years until really, COVID was probably the best thing that ever happened for me. One, it made me realize how much I was pouring into football and not necessarily getting it back in return, and how hard I was working without really taking a break. And so I really kind of took a month off, and I realized I really want to do this full time. I want to do the defensive side of football. And so I just started writing even more, started tinkering with creating videos and things like that. And Substack, really Matthew Collar, who is on the Vikings beat, I think he's on Substack as well. He was like, dude, you got to get on this. And so I started doing that. And I was like, I didn't really think people would pay for it. People do. And now for 2 years, the last 2 years, I've been financially independent and I have been 100% Match Quarters full time. It's been really, really cool.
Wow, with three kids along the way, right?
With 3 kids along the way. Yes.
I love that. So we got two former like graduate assistants, low level assistants on this podcast today. I spent my time at USC, probably a decade or so prior to you coaching. So about 10 years older than you. I'm just assuming here based on our coaching trajectory. When you walked into Baylor, I'm curious your thoughts because when I walked into SC, I came off a Pitt where I was the guy that knew every position. I could play quarterback, I could left tackle, I could play outside backer. Like I knew every position on the field schematically. When I walked into the door at SC, I was like, "What language are you speaking?" I didn't know a thing. I'm curious for you what that was like, and then your transition to now where you sit at the forefront of expertise on Substack.
Yeah, I had a father, who's still my best friend. In fact, my dad actually gets to coach my oldest son at the junior high, so it's a lot of fun. So we are a football family all the time. He was always an offensive guy. And where I grew up in Liberty, Missouri, they always would put their best football players on defense. And so I always played defense. And it was just one of those things where I tried to get away from it, but I couldn't. And so I think when I walked into Baylor, I knew I wanted to coach at that level. And I didn't have a pathway into that. Like, again, I love my dad, but my dad wasn't a head coach that knew anybody there. I was not from Texas. I didn't play college football in Texas, so I didn't have any connections. And really, the DFO, Colin Schillenlaw, was like, "Look, I can't help you out, but if you can get into school, I can at least give you a seat in an office, and you can just, you know, pray that it works." And
As an
so,
undergrad.
as an undergrad, yeah, I'm
Oh, that's
well,
awesome.
as a graduate student, because
Okay.
I had already worked 1 year or 2 years now out of college, and I was like, "I hate this, I wanna try. If I don't try it, I'm gonna regret it." Right? And so here I am, I'm about to get married, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna quit my job. I'm gonna move to Waco, Texas," which is about an hour from where we are now and where my wife is from, and so but to your point is I thought again, same deal. I had always had a gift for understanding this game. It's really one of the few things that I'm good at. I'm good at running fast in a straight line, and I'm good at understanding defensive football. That's about it where that goes. And so I went in there and my father had always told me, "Don't say a word. Like, just sit there, do your job, take notes, don't say a word." And so I'm sitting there, but then afterwards, I would go in and I would ask Phil Bennett questions I knew the answer to because I think I had figured him out, but just smart questions, so he knew I was trying to figure this thing out. And he was so gracious enough to answer all of those, and he started realizing like, okay, this guy knows he's picking it up at least. But yeah, learning that basic defense, which is essentially a derivative of the Jimmy Johnson quarter system, and then moving into where you start writing about different things. Because once you get to a certain point, like, okay, I've filled out my circle of competency. I need to now push that envelope out. And so trying to get into Saban and learning that language and then trying to learn Aranda, trying to learn Fangio, which are something like so every time you're trying to learn these languages, what you find out is really the reason why defense is so hard and defensive coaching just in general is really hard to get into is because it's so gate kept because no one really talks the same language. And so, in offense, we have the air raid, we have West Coast, we have the Coryell system. They really derive from really only 2 or 3 places, right? Defense, what you call one thing could be completely different or means a completely different thing for me on the other end. And there's really not other than I mean, even we sit here and argue about run fits, which you would think would be pretty standard. They're not. And then you would think about line placement. So the numbers for linings, the gap integrity, like do you call it a six or a six? Do you call it a seven? So do you call it a six eye? Like all these things. And then people will like sit here and die on molehills. So, but defensively, I think that's like to your point in your question is like, I had no idea what football really was until I got in at Baylor and working for a guy like Phil Bennett that dots the I's and crosses the T's. And then you start really getting that almost like a PhD in defense.
Yeah, Phil was great. I called a bunch of games when he was at Arizona State with Todd Graham. Know those guys well, and that scheme was fun to learn. I also called some games when you were coaching at Baylor, so I had to go back to my old call sheets, see like what the notes were from those games with Dino Babers on the sideline and,
Yeah.
and many other people that were part of that staff. So just to continue on with how you see the game, because I think what I'm most curious about is like you go to your page, Match Quarters, check it out again on Substack. It's awesome. It is a graduate level lens through the sport. So who is your audience? Because I look at it as a broadcaster, just to give you my purview of like my job is to understand the nuances that you talk about and make it so my wife who wasn't even born in this country can understand it, or my mom who wasn't born in this country can understand it. Like that is the job of me every Saturday. How do you view your role and your audience's desires where you have to meet them?
Yeah, so I've always seen myself as an elite teacher. That's always what I wanted to be. Even when I was teaching in class, like the one unique thing here about this state of Texas is that you have to be a full time teacher in order to coach. So a lot of and two, you're not coaching PE. In fact, I would argue most coaches would tell you coaching PE is actually one of the worst things that you can do. So it's not just doing athletics. These are like the kids that aren't in band or in any extracurricular activity. Like you don't want to sit in a gym and try and make these kids walk around a track. So you're in a classroom. I wanted to be an elite teacher. And I think for me, what Match Quarters has really become is my way of transitioning into kind of like a servant leadership role where I didn't want to necessarily play the political game of trying to become a high school football, like a head coach here in the state of Texas. And really, one of the things I realized really, really kind of quickly after I transitioned from Baylor was I don't really want to hire the woman, the girl softball coach. I don't care if Jimmy on the JV soccer team is having problems with the coach. I don't want to have to be pulled into that constantly. I just want to do football. And so to me, I wanted to create a space that was a safe space for really anybody to learn defense because, again, defensively is one of those places where it's really gate kept and it's really hard to get in and it's really hard to learn and it's really hard to peel away those layers. And it's complex because it's really easy to see offense. That guy's fast, that guy scored, or they're attacking this area of the field, or they're doing this certain thing, or that quarterback is throwing to that receiver. Defensively, it's hard to tell at what guys are doing. They're not telling you how the front structure is doing that. So I wanted to create a space where smart fans can get something out of it all the way to NFL coaches. And so I have probably one of the most unique followings where I have high school athletes, I have high school kids that want to get into journalism, sports journalism, all the way through to smart fans. And then at every level of coach, whether you are just starting coaching or this is your first year as a defensive coordinator, to I've been coaching for 30 years. I love studying the game, all the way through to NFL coaches, guys that are just now getting defensive coordinator jobs or are becoming that, are following me on Match Quarters. And I think that's really, really cool. And it's really humbling and it really makes me put out good content. I can't get lazy on it.
All right, I want to find out if you want to coach again. Before that, a quick word from our sponsor, 76.
With the Fuel Forward app, the more discounts you stack, the more you save.
Feels good to save. I know, right?
How low can you go?
Okay, Cody, do you want to coach again? Like, do you see yourself as a coach now? I get asked this question all the time as a guy who used to be on a staff. I'm kind of curious your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I would love to coach. Again, though, when people approach me about this, I tell them it's a lot harder to get back into it than you think. One, I live in the state of Texas. Private schools in the state of Texas really they play kind of on their own thing. There's not really one around me, so I can't be a full-time employee. Otherwise, it would pull away from what my major business is. And then two, college. Again, that's more of a recruiting base, not necessarily a knowledge base. I think it is kind of changing. But right now, where we are in that state, that's not something I would want to get into. I think if an NFL team came to me and was like, hey, we want you to do something, I think I would probably do that. But again, I own my own time, and that's really, really hard for people to understand. Of like, yeah, I know you see the logo, and I know that you see like, oh, but the potential of this could be really cool. But I'm I have 3 kids and a wife that I have to worry about. I also own my own time. I go to all of my son's practices. I have 2 of them. I go to all of their games. I go to everything on the weekends. I have a daughter who I take to dance practice on Wednesday, and I don't have to worry about it. So, I mean, to me, that is important, to me, and so it would take something very, very special to, pull me away from that.
I love that. Yeah, clarity on the things that matter most. So let's talk about some trends. I'm spending my off season now, like going back and studying teams in the Big Ten. I'm calling games on NBC. It's primarily Big Ten and Notre Dame games. I'm curious for you, do you anticipate trends or see trends from the NFL that you think will trickle down into college football?
Yes, I will preface this first though, and I kind of actually I people follow me at the higher levels for trends. That's a lot of times they're looking at me like they're going through my Twitter feed, which is essentially just a visual library of football for the last 10 years. They want to know what the trends are. Uh, the football at the NFL level is essentially like playing in the middle of the field. And so the spacing is a little different than at the college level, which is going to be played on the hash. Now, a prime example of this, so to give like your listeners and people that are fans an example of this, the Western Michigan defense is the same defense that the Chargers run, which is why they hired him, O'Leary, to be their defense coordinator. It's not the same. Like, they don't it's the same defense, it's the same playbook. It's the same thing with, Wink Martindale would tell you. His playbook for the Giants before he took that job at Michigan, there's certain things that he can do, and there's certain things that he can't. I think that at the college level, you get a little bit more aggressive. You play a little bit more you can really have some really, like, off the chart leaning to one direction where we only play cover 3. We only play cover 1. We only play quarters. Like, you can get to some of those situations. I think so. You're a little bit more aggressive at the college level. I think the spacing's different. So some of these, like the trends at the NFL, because I'm getting a lot of these questions asked from college coaches, is these deuce pressures or tango pressures. So Steve Spagnuolo has been doing this forever. It's a Jim Johnson tree, with former Eagles, longtime Eagles defense coordinator, where we're going to send 5, but we're going to play cover 2 or quarters behind it. Those have become really popular at the NFL level. McDonald ran them all year with Seattle. So if you watch the Super Bowl, you saw several of those. At the college level, they don't necessarily make sense because of the spacing, because you are now that field side is so much larger and you can't really compress the field because in the NFL, the formations are pretty condensed because spacing out doesn't really help you. And so at the college level, spacing does help you because the talent differential is a lot different as well. So at the college level, the difference between Indiana and let's say a team like Indiana State or even a team like Kent State or one of the MAC schools like Ball State in the same state, that's a huge difference, right? And so you just don't see that at the NFL. So everything has to be kind of compact. Everything has to be like razor sharp. Where at the college level, you're basically playing almost 90 plays a game, right? So you can kind of go through this. So trends that I see from the NFL heading down into college would be some of these ways that you're seeing teams go from a 4 down front to a 5 down front, which is just walking the will linebacker down, shifting into different front structures. I think playing more Tampa. Tampa has really become, and these non-traditional Tampas have become really, really popular at the NFL level, and now we're seeing that again at the college level. I think more vision drop. We saw this with Indiana. Indiana 5 years ago would have been literally an outlier. I mean, they still are now, but just playing completely vision, not matching anybody up 5 years ago would have been insane. So I
So
think some of those.
explain that because Indiana national champion Brian Haynes, the reigning Burroughs Award winner and top assistant coach in the country, their defensive coordinator. Dumb that down for our viewers. And you
Yeah.
say vision coverage, and we'll get into them, especially the pressures that they bring.
Yeah. So vision means we're going to try, it's not necessarily spot drop which is in coaching terms is like country coverages, meaning you are literally going to drop to a spot and then you are going to settle and then you're going to look around. These are more, we're going to work to an area, but we're going to relate to the closest receiver. So it's kind of like a zone match, but they're playing pure vision. They're trying to stay on top of everything. So if you watch the Hoosiers at all, they didn't press very much. They played a ton of zone, didn't play a lot of man. And so they're trying to get the quarterback really to be pinpoint accurate, where you have what are more like the Saban style of defense, which is man match, where we're hard bracketing
Say
receivers.
Oregon, for instance.
Oregon's a great, yeah.
Yeah.
Oregon's another good example of, and really, he's kind of even them. They've relaxed on a lot of these man match principles. So what does that mean? That means once those receivers kind of show you their release and our rules within our system tells me I have him for the whole play. If he runs all the way across the field, I'm going with him. It's a true split field coverage in the sense that the right side is completely independent from the left side. If anybody crosses that midpoint line, I have to go with them. And you just don't see that a lot of times at the NFL level because they'll just play man, right? They won't play a lot of these sticky coverages. And so I think offenses have gotten really, really good at your match rules. And so by going back, that's the whole argument with pure progression versus split field reading, where now you're seeing more quarterbacks and offensive coordinators want to go back to pure progression because it's like, is that guy open? No. Is that guy open? No. Is that guy open? Yes. Throw the ball, right? Instead of relying on, oh, I'm looking at the weak safety. Does he tell me where it's going? Or I'm looking now, it's funny. Actually, somebody talked about this the other day at the NFL level. They're now looking and keying the nickel pre-snap to see where his leverage is inside or outside to then predict what the coverage is going to be.
Yeah. Okay. Couple follow-ups to that. And then one final one I want to ask you about Ohio State. So to me, what was so fascinating about Indiana is when you either call their games or watch their games, it can look chaotic. But when you dive into it, like there's an art form to their defensive line having all this freedom and linebackers simply cleaning it up. I think there's something there in not giving up explosive plays, which I think is super impressive. To your point on like the Tampa 2 style, so just for the visual, imagine two safeties. And then oftentimes back in the 90s, you'd watch our dear friend Monty Kiffin's middle linebacker, Hardy Nickerson, sprint and run to the middle of the field. Sometimes you see that, but what I've seen a ton is like the Caleb Downs of the world playing top down and playing deep middle safety, kind of center fielder, and then being able to play the run or play that middle defender, which I think is become the trend of last season defensively in college football. I anticipate more people. What I'm most curious about, though, Ohio State, you referenced earlier, the NFL and college, talking about trends here. Again, Cody Alexander here. Check it out, matchquarters.com. It has always been a struggle, I think, for NFL guys to come to college because of the hashes defensively. I referenced Monty Kiffin. Love him and their family. They struggled. And the common thought every time from defensive-minded coordinators from the NFL to colleges, man, the spacing is just, I got to wrap my head around it because of where the hashes are. But now we're watching Matt Patricia crush it, right? We're watching NFL minds come down to college. I'm curious, what do you see from Ohio State? I get it, elite players, but also whether it's the coffee house splits that you've done a beautiful job illustrating at your webpage. We've talked about it on TV a ton. Like, what did you see from them specifically? And then what do you think about the arc that NFL guys to college are having? Because it doesn't seem like they're struggling as much. Danton Lynn is another one who's a good example now at Penn State.
Well, what you've seen is the spread won in 2018. I don't know if anybody noticed, but 2018 was when essentially the spread won. We're not going back. It took over the NFL. We had basically a basketball game between the Chiefs and the Rams, if you remember that year.
Great game at the Coliseum.
I mean,
So good.
Defensively, it was a nightmare. I'm just laughing because
You
I'm
hated
like,
it? Yeah, I loved it.
I've been through plenty of those in the 3 years I was at Baylor, where even though we scored 70, we were still giving up like 30. So it was like, yeah, I've been there. I understand what that's like. And so I think what's happened is that the defensive coordinators had to quickly pivot into understanding space. And the NFL is the last major team sport to officially become a space sport. And so if you think about it in kind of a global sense, soccer, it became all about the wingers, right? Get those guys wide, have them dive in, spread that defense out, kick the ball into the box, have somebody run through into space because everybody's spread out, and then I'm going to get it in there. Then you go to the NBA, it's 3-and-D, right? We're going to spread everybody out, hit the 3-pointer and then layups. Don't shoot any mid shots. I mean, right? The mid shot jumper doesn't exist in the NBA anymore. Why? Well, because it's all deep or it's all 100%. So it's the same thing if you think about the spread. We want the vertical deep shots, or we want the quick check downs, get the yak, right? That's what Shanahan and McVay have really lived in, is those intermediate quick shots, get the yak, right? Especially the 49ers. And so I think like the NFL had to really pivot hard. And so of course they did the most. Everybody always goes through this kind of, it's a very predictable cycle of, well, you're going to run a bunch of RPOs. We're going to play man. Well, the NFL in 2019 doubles down on man. Even worse results, right? 2019, the offenses are still exploding. And so then they're like, okay, crap, we got to figure something out. This is not working. So what do we get? We get the Fangio system comes in and says, hey, we're going to play everything from a 2-high shell. And you mentioned it with Indiana. We're going to cap everything. We can keep guys and we can stunt guys up front. All that's great, but we're going to stay on top of everything. We are not going to give up explosive. You're going to have to matriculate down the field, right? You're going to have to work down the field. We're going to force field goals instead of touchdowns. And so I think like for these NFL guys that have come back, they're coming back at the perfect time as well, because I always think of the Big 12 as kind of the litmus test of where we are within these predictable cycles through football. We always go through a point where we get heavy, then we get light again, then we get heavy again. And it's just that yo-yo, because remember, defense is constantly chasing by the way. Well, look at the Big 12 now, and it's a bunch of tight ends, right? We're playing with 12 personnel. We're playing with different, some people are even getting a fullback back on the field. So you're having to come back and condense these sets. Well, what has the NFL traditionally been? It's been big boy football. It's been 12 personnel, 13 personnel, 21 personnel has all started to come back. And we saw that this year in the NFL. So I think them coming back also, I think with social media, a lot of them don't want to be that college guy, the NFL guy that came to college and got roasted. So they're also all kind of talking to each other. Hey, what are some things that you did? What's the biggest difference that you had? And don't forget, like Patricia had Steve Belichick to go off of at Washington of like, hey, what were some things that you did? Because if you really look at it, it was very much structurally the same. I thought Patricia obviously had a little bit more kind of juice to his defense. They did more things schematically than what we saw at Washington from Belichick. So I think that to me has really been it. It's really been the evolution of the game has brought the NFL and college football closer than I think most people realize.
Yeah, that's really cool. All right, last two quick ones. We'll get you out of here. There is a pseudo lazy take, but also is kind of backed up by stats, that if you're an air raid offense, right? You referenced you were at Baylor when they were running that and making that thing sing. You give up a ton of points. I live in LA. Lincoln Riley is one of the top play callers in the last decade in college football. They're kind of coming back. They got a lot of juice here within the Big Ten and I think around the country. And they're on their third defensive coordinator in his time there. What do you make of that take of if you run? And I don't think Lincoln runs like just air raid. Mike Leach 8 plays 10 like what? I don't think they do that. I know they don't do that. But the general thought I think is one that fans, especially SC fans and college football fans, are like, well, no air raid team has ever won a national championship. I'm curious what you think about that from the defensive side. You've been on the defensive staff where you scored a bunch of points and gave up a boatload of yards and points. Still true today?
I think what happens is it's the classic like 3-point shooting team, or the team that does the full court press and runs the court like in basketball, of where you're just going to run out of gas at some point, right? Like the offense is, you're going to go through these 3 and outs. Defense is going to go out on the field the whole time, and you're going to end up, out of gas at some point. These are a lot of times when you play opposite of a spread offense or an air raid offense, you're playing really mitigating defense. You're probably only putting a lot of money into the offensive side. So a lot of your money and your capital and who you're recruiting is not going into elite defensive players. And I think what ends up happening a lot of times is that you kind of end up falling off, or you end up going cold. I mean, that was a big thing for us at Baylor. We had, when we played UCF in that that which, by the way, was one of the best G5 teams of all time. We ran into a buzzsaw. They were healthy. We were not. Our offense kind of stunk. Our defense wasn't healthy, and we kind of got smoked. And then you go and you see some of these others again where the offense, it's like shooting 3-pointers. There's going to be days where you don't have it. And so what's happening is the offense isn't playing a mitigation style where, okay, at least we can lean on the run. At least we can get 3 or 4 yards here. Okay, our deep shots aren't working. Well, we've got these concepts that'll help us underneath, right? Whereas it's like, hey, if our deep shot's not there, we're not really pushing the ball down the field. We're kind of screwed, right? We don't really have anything. Our run game isn't really, and it's kind of more of a finesse or a passive. We're kind of running the ball to keep you honest, right? Instead of running the ball to control a game. And so I think what happens defensively, and we experienced this. I mean, look, I lived it. Is that you end up being on the field. So I think a better way of looking at it is almost like points per drive,
Yeah,
or points per play, or how many ever you want to do it. I also think too, starting yardage is really important. Where are you starting?
for sure.
Because that's
Yeah,
another thing too. So you add air raid, right? Or we're still playing these spread offenses, but we're also going for it a lot more on fourth down. And in
yeah.
areas that generally we haven't done that traditionally in the last 10 years. So you're getting your defense in kind of worse situations. So I think it's not really a lazy take. You're right. The stats back it up. I just think that it's a stylistic choice that a lot of college coaches make, and that then affects the way that the defenses play.
We talked about a lot of different things, different coverages, schemes, blitzes, looks. If you had to say in college football in 2026, the one trend that I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is coming, what do you think it would be?
I think we're going to see a lot more investment in being multiple. And I think we see this with Oklahoma. The two best examples of this are probably Oklahoma and are probably Indiana. I think a lot of people are going to go in and they're going to study Indiana and they're going to say, look what they did without all these premium players. Are there good players at Indiana? Yes. Are we talking about, even with that's what my leading up into national championship, people are like, hey, there's good players on Indiana. I say, yeah. But if you go look at it, like recruiting wise, Miami had like 54 or 5-star guys on their team. So athletically, they were better than Indiana. I just think that you see a scheme like Indiana and people are, hey, this is a movement heavy. I think we're going to see movement heavy. I think people are going to reinvest in the way that they run simulated pressures, not just spamming them or running them to running. And simulated pressure just means we have a bunch of guys on the line, but we're only going to rush 4. Or on a regular down, we show a base presentation, we blitz a guy, but we're really only rushing 4. And so I think you're going to see a reinvestment in that. I also think like if you want to be multiple, and I think Mike McDonald has really leaned into this. He calls his defense a modular defense. And the reason why is because we're teaching techniques that then build on the scheme. So the techniques actually build the scheme, which means we can change up things week to week to fit the matchups we want. And I think more and more people are going to study the way that really Indiana ran cover 3. That's all they ran. They just ran every version of cover 3. I mean, it's funny. I know Ola Adams, who's the DB coach, and after I think the Big 12 championship, I was like, geez, I think you ran every version of cover 3. He goes, yeah, man, we had to keep them guessing, right? So it's just like, but so if you're a fan and you're like, how is that not complex? Well, when you're running vision zone, so go back and remember, we're staying on top, we're getting to an area, but we're relating. Think of it as X's on a whiteboard. I just have to get guys to the X, and I can get them in different ways. As long as that guy can physically make it, or it doesn't put us in a bind because he's coming all the way from the boundary to the field, which we don't want, we can almost run any kind of coverage rotation. So think of it in geometric terms. We're building triangles. And so as long as I can build different triangles and make them look like different things, and you mentioned actually one of the more popular ones, which is I'm going to show single high. I'm going to make it look like cover 1. And then my like my post safety is just going to drop into the middle of the field. And I'm going to either pop out one of the overhangs, pop out the corner. We're going to have somebody else play the deep half, but that safety never moves. And in fact, I'm writing an article right now on the 49ers and the way that they use their weak side safety as basically a vision player. Well, he doesn't move. So it's like anytime that you have a guy that doesn't move, the quarterback's sitting there and thinking like, well, what's going on? I'm not getting any information from this. So now I'm going to have to flip my eyes. Well, by that time, if he's just a second slower, he's like, well, he's not really moving. I'm just going to whip it in there. And then his eyes flip. And then, well, so does the vision safety. So I think like that will be, I think a lot of people are going to study Oklahoma. If there is one person that is an absolute outlier, it is Brent Venables and the volume at which he runs. And it's look, typically when you have a lot of volume, you have a degradation in the play. That's proven. I actually have it on match quarters. You can look at there's a chart, and he's sitting at the very top, like just outlier. And I think a lot of people will study him and say, how are they so multiple in the same sense as how Indiana was so multiple? So I think you're going to see a lot of different structures. And then the last one I'll finish with you. Sorry on this long monologue. I could do this all day.
I know you
But
can.
Ohio State being able to kind of take that NFL structure, but run some three high defense out of it, go in and, oh, look, we got into a 5-man front, which is really popular in the NFL of how can we be, yeah, we're a base 4-down structure, but we can move into a 5-man front. I think we're going to see a lot more guys like Averill Reese get a shot where I don't know if he's a linebacker. I don't know if he's an edge, but he's a good football player and he's really good at blitzing. And so we're going to use him in that kind of sense. I think we're really seeing that add up. So those would be the things that I would see at the college level.
I love that. Arvell Reese is a beast. We'll get right up him at Y option as well, coming up shortly prior to the draft. Lastly, in like a minute, when you watch games, like, are you just like, yo, you don't know what you're talking about? Do you just like hit mute? Like, how do you watch college football?
There are some times, but I look, I try and tell people like too, like with my fandom, I'm a fan, not a fanatic. I like watching football. I'm not gonna let something not take away that joy. I don't let people steal my joy. That's what I
Bro,
don't let. I don't look. So yes, no, there are times where I'm like, well, that's not right. But it's, really the only person that cares is like my 8-year-old. He's like, "What do you mean? What's wrong? Like, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Don't worry about it. It's just me being stupid." So, but no, yeah, there are times, but no, I don't let it steal my joy. I still watch football.
I love it, man. Well, you gave us a lot of joy today. Your page gives me a lot of personal joy. Congrats on everything, Cody. It's been a beautiful conversation. I'm so happy for you and your family. I know you get asked a lot. I get asked a lot. How'd you pivot out of coaching? And you found a way. And you coach up millions of people on your page. I feel like I do that every Saturday in college football, and it makes me feel like still connected to the game. So thank you for the time, man. It was an absolute pleasure. We'll share this on both of our Substack channels and make sure we keep supporting one another, man. So appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. Really appreciate it.
All right, there it is, Cody Alexander. Check him out. Match Quarters. That's his page. All the socials, all the things. They'll be linked in our show notes and on our yoption.com article. Of course, 76. None of this is possible without you. They are a key sponsor, keeping you on the go so you never miss a beat. Go to yoption.com, check it out, share it with a friend. Happy off season, folks. We got the combine right around the corner.